It is late, and the house has finally gone quiet. The last door has been closed, the last light switched off somewhere down the hall, and the only sound now is the small, familiar hum of the refrigerator, or maybe the wind against the window. You are in bed, blankets pulled up to your chin, and the day has dissolved into that soft, hazy space between waking and sleeping. If you are comfortable, if you are warm, then you are already in the perfect place to hear this story. Because tonight's story is about cold, about the kind of cold that does not just make you shiver, but that presses down on the earth like a heavy stone. And yet, it is not a story of suffering. It is a story of people who learned long ago to live with that cold, to wrap themselves in it, to even make something like a home within it. We are going to the high Andes, far, far up, where the air gets thin and the sky gets impossibly close. There is a place called the Altiplano, which means high plain, and it is exactly that. A vast, open, windswept plateau cradled between the great mountain ranges of the Andes, sitting at an elevation of over 12,000 feet, so high that the mountains themselves seem to have given up trying to be steep, and instead spread out into wide, flat valleys that roll on for miles and miles under an enormous dome of sky. At that altitude, the sun is fierce. It beats down with an intensity that can burn your skin in the middle of the day, even as the air around you stays cool. But the moment the sun begins to sink toward the horizon, something shifts. The heat seems to leak out of the world, as if someone has pulled a plug. The temperature drops and keeps dropping long after the stars come out. By midnight, the ground itself can be frozen solid, hard as iron, and the air can bite at any exposed skin with a sharp, metallic edge. And yet, people have lived there for thousands of years, not just survived, but lived. They have raised children there, built homes, raised herds of animals, told stories, laughed, loved, and slept through those freezing nights. How did they do it? How does anyone sleep when the temperature plunges far below freezing, when there is no central heating, no thick glass windows, no electric blanket hum, no extra quilt tucked away in the closet? That is the question we are going to explore tonight, but we will do it slowly. We will do it the way the herders themselves might have done it, moving carefully, deliberately, paying attention to every small detail of the world around them. Because survival on the Altiplano is not a dramatic, heroic act. It is 1,000 small acts, repeated every single day. It is a way of moving through the world with patience and knowledge. And perhaps, if we listen closely, we will learn something that we can carry back down the mountain into our own quiet, comfortable rooms. Let us begin, then, with the evening. Picture the Altiplano as the light fades. The sun, which has been blazing overhead all afternoon, is now a low, red disk on the horizon, spilling long shadows across the yellow-brown grass. The wind, which never really stops on the plateau, picks up a little, cutting through the thin air. In the distance, a flock of sheep and llamas is moving, slowly, almost reluctantly, down a gentle slope toward a cluster of low, stone buildings. The herders follow behind, wrapped in brightly colored ponchos and heavy woolen skirts, their sandals making no sound on the packed earth. There is no hurry in their steps. They have done this same walk at the same time every day for their entire lives, as did their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, for generations stretching back far beyond memory. The animals know the way. The people know the way. The entire procession moves like a slow, living river, flowing toward the shelter of the corral. The corral is a simple thing, just a low wall of stones, stacked without mortar, with a gate made of wooden poles tied together with leather straps. It is not much to look at, but for the animals, it is safety. It is the place where they will spend the night, close together, protected from the wind and from the predators that roam the darkness. The herders open the gate, and the animals stream in, their hooves clicking against the stones. There is a brief, chaotic ballet of shuffling bodies and soft bleats, and then, gradually, they settle. The llamas find their spots. The sheep bunch together into a single, undulating mass of wool and warmth. The gate is closed. The night begins. For the herder, the work is not done. There is still the evening meal to prepare, the fire to tend, the children to tuck in. The home is a small structure, maybe 1 or 2 rooms, with thick stone walls and a roof of thatch or corrugated metal weighed down with rocks. The doorway is low, so low that you have to duck to enter, and that is intentional. It keeps the wind out. It keeps the warmth in. Inside, there is a stove, a simple clay or metal affair, fed with the dried dung of llamas and sheep. This is a detail that might make us pause, might make us wrinkle our noses, but it is one of the secrets of life on the Altiplano. The high plateau has almost no trees. There is no firewood to gather. The only fuel available is what the animals themselves provide, day after day, year after year. The dung is collected, shaped into patties, and left to dry in the sun. When it is dry, it burns with a slow, steady, smokeless heat, and it is this heat that cooks the dinner, warms the small room, and becomes the center of the family's life. The smoke from the fire finds its way through cracks in the roof, carrying the scent of cooking potatoes and the faint, earthy smell of the burning dung itself. To us, it might be an unfamiliar smell, but to the herders, it is the smell of home. It is the smell of safety, of warmth, of the waning hours of the day when the family gathers together. Now, let us talk about the room itself, because there is something remarkable about the way these homes are built, something that took me a long time to really understand. The walls are thick, yes, but they are not insulated in the way we might think of insulation. There is no fiberglass, no foam, no double-paned glass in the small, square windows. And yet, the room stays warmer than the outside. At first, this seems like magic, but it is actually physics, working in a very simple, very ancient way. The stones of the wall absorb heat during the day, under that fierce high-altitude sun. They hold that heat, slowly releasing it into the room as the night cools. The interior of the house, with its low ceiling and small windows, traps the heat from the fire and from the bodies of the people inside. It is not warm, not in the way our homes are warm. You would still see your breath in the morning, but it is warm enough. it is survivable. And on the Altiplano, survivable is a triumph. But the walls and the fire are only part of the story. The rest of the story is woven, quite literally, into the clothing and blankets that the herders wear and sleep under. For this, we need to talk about the animals, the llama and the alpaca, the backbone of life on the high plain. These are not the soft, fluffy farm animals you might have seen in a petting zoo. They are hardy, tough, intelligent creatures, perfectly adapted to the thin air and brutal temperature swings of the Andes. Their wool is not just warm, it is extraordinary. Alpaca wool, for example, is lighter than sheep's wool, and yet it is incredibly insulating. It has tiny air pockets trapped within the fibers, which act as a barrier against the cold. And there is something else, something that is hard to explain unless you have felt it. Alpaca wool has a softness that feels almost alive, a warmth that seems to come from the animal itself, as if some of that calm, steady heat of the llama's body has been spun into the yarn. Llama wool is coarser, but it is even more durable, more water resistant. It is used for the heavy, woven blankets that the herders used to spread over the packed earth floor, or on top of low beds of straw. The wool of the vicuña, the wild ancestor of the alpaca, is even finer, even softer, but it is rare and precious, reserved for the finest garments, for the most special occasions. But the process of turning this wool into warm clothing and blankets is not quick. It is slow, painstaking work. The spinning is done by hand, using a simple drop spindle that twirls the fibers into thread. The women sit by the fire or outside in the sun, their fingers moving with a practiced rhythm that they have known since childhood. The treadle of the loom clacks and thumps, a sound that has echoed across the Altiplano for centuries. It takes weeks, sometimes months, to weave a single large blanket. But that blanket will last for a generation. It will be handed down from mother to daughter, father to son. And then there are the clothes, the layers. This is where the herder's genius for warmth becomes really clear. They do not rely on a single, very heavy coat. Instead, they wear several layers of lighter clothing, each layer trapping air between the garments. The air is the actual insulator. The clothing just holds it in place. On a typical winter's night on the Altiplano, a herder might wear a woven shirt, a vest, or a sleeveless tunic made of thick wool, a poncho over the top, and perhaps a heavy shawl or cape for extra warmth. On their heads, they wear woolen hats or the distinctive chalo, the ear-flapped knit cap that is so often associated with the Andes. The feet are protected by sandals, but inside those sandals, or sometimes instead of them, the herders wear thick woolen socks. They know, as we do, that if your feet are cold, your whole body is cold. But on the Altiplano, you cannot afford to have cold feet. It is dangerous. It is life-threatening. We have to remember that this is not a place where a person can go inside and turn up the thermostat. The cold is not an inconvenience. It is a force of nature, an active presence, a thing that can reach into your bones and take your life if you are careless. And so every choice, every piece of clothing, Every habit of the day is shaped by this awareness. The herders carry warmth with them, close to their bodies, always. The night closes in. The wind has died down. The sky is a blaze of stars, so many stars that they seem to crowd each other, spilling across the darkness like milk spilled on a black table. The Milky Way is so bright and so dense, so close, that you feel like you could reach up and stir it with your finger. And it is cold, bitterly, achingly, breathtakingly cold. The temperature has sunk far below freezing. The water in the clay jug by the door has a thin shell of ice on its surface. The skin of the earth has hardened into a brittle crust. But inside the small stone house, there is warmth. Not comfortable warmth, perhaps, but life-giving warmth. The family is gathered around the stove, sharing a meal. They eat potatoes, which are not just a food here, but a sacred gift, a gift that came from this very earth. They eat quinoa, the tiny, protein-rich grain that has nourished this people for millennia. They drink a thick, warming soup, flavored with herbs, and perhaps a bit of dried meat. The fire glows. The shadows dance on the walls. The faces of the family are lit with a soft, orange light. Now is the time when we can fully understand the most important secret of all. Because soon, the family will go to sleep. And the question is how? There are several answers, and each one is a small miracle of ingenuity. The first answer is the bed itself. On the floor, or sometimes on a raised platform of packed earth or stone, the herders spread their thick, woolen blankets. These are not just for cover. They are the mattress, the base layer, the foundation of sleep. On top of the blankets, they may place a woven mat made of reeds or straw. As for blankets to cover themselves, the herders rely on the pile of woolen blankets they have woven over the years. 2 or 3 large, heavy blankets are enough. They pull the blankets up over themselves, tuck them tightly under their chins, and sometimes even close the opening around their heads, creating a kind of tent, a tiny pocket of warm air that they exhale into, filling it with their own breath. It is a cocoon of living warmth. The second answer is the family itself. On the Altiplano, as in many cold places around the world, people did not historically sleep alone. The entire family sleeps together in the same room, often on the same raised platform, or in a single, large bed area. This is not just a matter of convenience. It is a survival strategy. Bodies generate heat. Many bodies generate more heat. When you sleep in a tight cluster, huddled together, you share that warmth. You create a microclimate of heat that may be several degrees warmer than the rest of the room. It is a simple, ancient, profoundly human way of staying alive. The children sleep between the parents or between older siblings. The grandparents are kept in the warmest spot, near the back of the bed, away from any drafts. The baby is swaddled so tightly in so many layers that only a tiny, sleepy face peeks out. And over the whole family, the pile of blankets creates a lid, a seal that traps the heat of all those bodies together. But perhaps the most fascinating answer, the one that surprised me the most when I first read about it, involves the animals. Because in some parts of the Altiplano, The herders did not just keep their animals close for safety. They brought them indoors. Or, to put it more accurately, they arranged for the animals to be in an adjacent room, or in the same room, in a way that created an extraordinary source of warmth. In the high Altiplano, where the nights are brutal, the distinction between the human dwelling and the animal corral could sometimes blur. There are accounts of herders, particularly in the colder, higher reaches of the plateau, who kept their llamas and sheep in a section of the same structure as their home. The animals were not in the living space itself, not usually, but in a shared interior space, separated by a low wall or a partition of woven mats. But that partition was not airtight, and the heat from the animals, from their large bodies, from their many bodies, from their constant, low metabolism, would slowly drift through the cracks, warming the human space on the other side. Think about that for a moment. The llamas are like living radiators. They are warm to the touch, and that warmth radiates outward into the night air. To have an entire herd of them packed closely together in a confined space is to have a massive, breathing, living furnace right next to your bedroom. And the herders knew this. They might not have had the language of thermodynamics, but they understood that sleeping next to the animals was a way to survive. It was not just about keeping the animals safe from predators. It was about mutual survival. The animals brought their warmth, their fur, their steady breath, and the humans brought protection, care, and the promise of food and shelter in return. There is even a tradition among some herders of taking a specific animal into the sleeping area on the coldest nights. A young lamb, perhaps, or a newborn alpaca, or a favorite llama who is old and trusted. The animal would be placed near the bed, or sometimes even in the bed, nestled among the blankets, its soft, warm fleece pressed against the human bodies. It is a kind of furry hot water bottle, a living heating pad, and it is impossible to imagine a more intimate or more practical relationship between human and animal. I remember reading an account from an anthropologist who had spent time with Andean herder families. She described how, in the middle of the night, she would wake up and see the mother of the family, asleep with a newborn llama nestled in the curve of her arm, both of them breathing slowly, peacefully, their warmth mingling under the blanket. It was not sentimental, she wrote. It was practical. It was the difference between a night of restful sleep and a night of shivering wakefulness. The llama was not a pet. It was a partner in survival. This idea of sharing warmth is ancient, of course. Humans have always huddled together against the cold, but there is something particularly beautiful about the Andean version of this huddle. It is so deeply intertwined with their whole way of life. The animals are not just property, not just a resource. They are part of the family, in a literal, physical sense. Their warmth is woven into the fabric of the home and into the dreams of the people who sleep beside them. And what about the cold itself? Does it ever truly go away? No, it does not. It is always there, crouched at the edges of the firelight. It is always waiting, just outside the blankets, just outside the door. The cold is a constant companion on the Altiplano, And because it is a constant, the people have learned to be constantly prepared. They do not fight the cold in a dramatic, heroic way. They simply refuse to let it win. They outlast it. They outwait it. They wrap themselves in warmth, and they wait for the sun to come back. There's something to be learned from that, I think, even for those of us who do not live on a 12,000-foot high plateau. We do not have to fear the cold the way the herders do. But we all have our own versions of the cold. We all have our own long, dark nights, our own moments when the world feels thin and hostile, and the warmth seems to be leaking out of our lives. And the herders offer us a quiet lesson. The lesson is not that the cold does not matter. It does. The lesson is that warmth can be found, even in the most barren places. It can be carried with you, in your clothes, in your blanket, in the bodies of the people and animals you love. It can be created, preserved, and shared. And perhaps that is the most human thing of all. Now, let us travel back in time a little. Let us pull back the curtain of the present and look at the longer history of this land, because the herders we are imagining tonight are not the first to have walked these slopes. Their ancestors and the ancestors of their ancestors have been here for thousands of years, and the strategies they use today are the result of a long, slow accumulation of knowledge, passed down patiently from one generation to the next. Imagine being the first humans to arrive on the Altiplano. It was a journey that would have taken centuries, perhaps millennia, but some group of hunters and gatherers, following game or seeking new lands, eventually found themselves standing on this high, cold plateau. They would have been struck by how different it was from the valleys below, from the green, temperate regions where they had probably made their home. Here, the air is thin. Walking up a slope, even a gentle one, leaves you breathless. Your heart beats faster. The sun burns your skin while the wind chills your bones. And the nights, those first nights must have been terrifying. Without the accumulated wisdom of generations, without the warm wool of domesticated animals, without the perfect knowledge of how to build a low stone house that traps heat, they would have huddled together, wrapped in animal skins, shivering in the darkness. They must have wondered why they had come to such a place. They must have wondered if they would survive. But survive they did. They learned to find shelter in caves and under rock overhangs. They learned to make clothing from the skins of the animals they hunted, how to shape and soften the leather so that it was flexible and warm. They learned which plants could be burned, which roots could be eaten, where the water would be found during the dry season. And then, over many centuries, they began to domesticate the animals that would become so central to their lives. The llama, they believe, was first domesticated around 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, somewhere in the high Andes. The alpaca followed. It must have been a gradual process, a slow dance between humans and animals, each learning to trust the other. The wild vicuña and the wild guanaco, the ancestors of these animals, must have been attracted to the salt licks and the grazing lands near human settlements. The humans, in turn, must have seen the value in having these animals nearby, not just for their meat and their skins, but for something even more valuable, their wool. And once they had wool, everything changed. The wool could be spun into thread. The thread could be woven into cloth. The cloth could be made into clothing, into blankets, into bags and slings and ropes. For the first time, humans could carry warmth with them. They were no longer completely dependent on the fur of a dead animal. They could make garments that fit them, that moved with them, that could be layered and adjusted. This was and is a technological revolution, one that we do not always appreciate because we have become so accustomed to the miracle of textiles. But the wool was not the only thing the animals provided. There was the dung, which, as we have discussed, became the fuel for their fires. And there was the meat, which provided protein in a land where protein was often scarce. And there were the bones, which could be made into tools and needles. And there was the sinew, which could be used for thread, stronger than any plant fiber. And there was the carrying power of the llama itself, which could transport heavy loads across the steep mountain trails, allowing trade and communication between distant communities. To understand life on the Altiplano, you have to understand that the llama and the alpaca were not just animals. They were entire industries. They were mobile homes, walking wardrobes, four-legged fuel depots, living food stores. Everything the herders needed, the animals provided. It is no wonder that the Andean peoples considered these animals sacred. It is no wonder that they created elaborate rituals and ceremonies around them, honoring the animals, thanking them for their sacrifice. There is an ancient Andean ceremony, still practiced in some places, that takes place in August, the coldest month. It is called the Kailpa, and it is a ceremony of marking and blessing the animals. The herders gather their llamas and alpacas, bring them to a central place, and decorate them with colorful earrings and tassels. They paint the animals' faces with dyes, chewing the coca leaf and blowing the juice over the animals as a blessing. They say prayers to Pachamama, the Earth Mother, asking for the health and fertility of the herds. It is a celebration, a festival of wool and fleece and living warmth. And at its heart is the simple, profound recognition that without these animals, the people would not survive the cold, the dark, the long, hungry winters. As the night deepens on our imaginary Altiplano, let us return to the small stone house, to the family settling in for sleep. The fire has been banked, the coals covered with ash to keep them smoldering until morning. The last cup of mate, the warming herbal tea, has been drunk. The children have been told to lie down, to stop whispering, to close their eyes. There is a last trip outside to the small, stone-walled latrine, a last look at the cold, bright stars, a last breath of the crisp, thin air. And then the sleeping arrangements are made. The mats and blankets are laid out. The family settles into their places, close together. The grandmother, perhaps, is already nodding off, her head wrapped in a woolen shawl. The father adjusts the pile of blankets over the whole group, tucking the edges under the bedding to keep the drafts out. The mother pulls her youngest child close, feeling the small body relax into sleep beside her. And in the adjacent room, or in the corner of the same room behind a low partition, the animals shuffle and settle too. The llamas kneel, one after another, folding their long legs beneath them in a slow, careful motion. The sheep press together, a dense woolly mass. The air in the room begins to warm slightly, filled with the gentle, rhythmic sounds of respiration, a soft, continuous breathing, as if the room itself is a lung, inhaling and exhaling. The cold is still outside. It presses against the thick stone walls. It creeps through the gaps around the door, sending a faint, icy draft across the floor. It coats the roof with frost, so that by morning, the thatch will look silver and sparkle in the first rays of the sun. But the cold cannot get in. Not really. The warmth inside is too strong, too stubborn. It is a warmth made of fire and wool, of bodies and breath, of love and habit, and the unbroken chain of knowledge that has been passed down from that first, shivering group of humans who dared to make their home on the high plain of the Andes. This is the heart of the story. This is what we came here to understand. The herders of the Altiplano survived not because they were stronger or braver than we are, but because they were more attentive. They paid attention to the world around them. They studied the properties of wool and stone and fire. They learned from their animals and their ancestors, and they built a way of life, a system of warmth that has endured for thousands of years. When we pull the covers up to our own chins tonight, we might think of them. We might imagine ourselves lying on a woven mat, surrounded by wool blankets, our head filling a tiny pocket of warm breath, feeling the soft, sleepy warmth of a llama beside us. We might feel a sense of gratitude for the simple, ordinary comfort of our own bed. We might even feel a strange, quiet kinship with those distant herders under their vast, starry sky, waiting with us for the sun. The night is silent now, except for the wind. The wind on the Altiplano has its own voice. It is not a howling, angry sound. It is more like a long, low whistle, a constant, wordless song that the herders have listened to all their lives. It blows over the plains, over the stone walls, over the sleeping bodies of people and animals, and it is the only thing moving in the whole, vast, frozen landscape. It is the sound of the night itself. And right now, in our quiet room, we can almost hear it. We can let our breathing slow to match the gentle rhythm of those sleeping herders and their herds. We can feel the weight of the blankets on our bodies, the warmth pooling around us. We are safe. We are warm. And the story of how they stay warm is safe with us, too. It is a story we can carry, like a small, glowing ember, into our own sleep. But the night is not over yet. The coldest hour is still to come, the hour just before dawn, when the temperature reaches its lowest point. And the herders know this. They know that the second half of the night is the hardest, the most dangerous. They have a saying, or perhaps it is not a saying, but just a truth that they hold in their bones, that the cold is most deadly when the night has been going on too long, when the fire has burned down to nothing, when the body's own heat has been slowly seeping away hour after hour. This is the hour when they must rely completely on their blanket, their companion, their own steady heartbeat. In the next part of our story, we will follow these herders through the darkest hour, through the long, slow, frozen hours before the sun returns. We will look at the strange and wonderful ways they kept their sleep warm, at the dreams that visited them, at the rituals they performed to welcome the dawn. We will look at the incredible journey of the potato and the invention of a food that could survive the cold, and the coca leaf that warmed the body from within. We will look at how they read the stars and the signs of the weather, how they planned for the winter, how they taught their children that the cold, while it can be cruel, can also be a teacher. But all of that, my sleepy friend, is for another time. For now, let us stay here, in this warm, quiet moment. Let us follow the herders a little way into their dreams. Let us imagine the steady, comfortable weight of a llama resting nearby, the soft wool smell of the blankets, the slow, patient breathing of the family around us. Let us drift gently, slowly down into that deep, dream-filled place where the cold cannot follow. The night is long, but the warmth is patient, and we have all the time in the world to sleep. And now we are deep in the heart of the night, the hour when the moon has crossed the sky and the stars have turned on their slow, silent wheel. The herders are asleep, or half asleep, drifting in and out of that light, watchful slumber that the cold demands. We might wonder what they dream about. Perhaps they dream of the animals, of the soft, warm bodies of their herds, of the gentle rhythm of a llama's steady breath. Perhaps they dream of the summer pastures, green and wet and full of flowers, or of the harvest of baskets stacked with potatoes, of the heavy, satisfying weight of a full sack of grain. Perhaps they dream of each other, of the faces of their children and their grandparents, of the long, winding road of their own lives, stretching back into the past and forward into the unknown. But whatever they dream, the dream is wrapped in the same warm cocoon of wool and skin and breath. The cold is there, outside, pressing against the walls, but it does not enter the dreams. It is not welcome there. The dreams are private, interior, warm. They are the herder's own small inner sun, burning gently through the night. We are in the second half of the night now, the deepest, darkest part. The fire has been reduced to embers, then to ash. The last traces of warmth from the evening meal have long since dissipated into the corners of the room. And yet, the room is not cold. Not really. It is cool, yes, but it is not the cold of the outside. It is a lived-in coolness, a comfortable coolness, a coolness that carries the faint smell of wool and straw and smoke, and the sound of slow, rhythmic breathing. This is the moment when the herders' accumulated wisdom matters most. The blankets are not just single layers. They are stacks, piles, layered bundles of cloth that the women have woven over long months, over years, over a lifetime. The weaving of an Andean blanket is not a quick task. It is a slow, patient art, a conversation between the weaver and the wool. The yarn has to be spun, twisted, dyed, and then woven on a simple loom, hour after hour, row after row. The pattern may be simple, or it may be complex, full of geometric shapes and colors that carry meaning from the weaver's community and family. But every blanket is a record of time, a repository of attention, a physical memory of the hands that made it. And when you lie under one of these blankets, you are not just lying under wool. You are lying under hours, days, weeks of someone's life. You are being held by the care and patience of a mother or a grandmother or an aunt, by the knowledge passed down through generations of weavers, by the long, slow turning of the seasons. There is something profound in that, something that a machine-made blanket can never quite capture. The machine-made blanket is warm, but it is anonymous. It does not know your name. It does not remember your childhood. But a hand-woven blanket, especially one that has been in a family for generations, is alive in its own way. It has absorbed the warmth of countless sleepers. It has been mended and patched and mended again. It has stories. The herders have a particular way of arranging their bedding that we might find strange and clever at the same time. They do not just lie down and pull the blanket over themselves. They make a kind of nest, a cocoon, a folded pocket of warmth. The blankets are laid over a woven mat, and then the sleeper slides in, wrapping themselves so that no part of the body is exposed. The head is often covered too, with a hat or a shawl, leaving only a small opening for the nose and mouth. This creates a tiny pocket of warm air around the face, air that has already been breathed and warmed by the body, kept close to the skin. The effect is strange but comforting, like being inside a warm, dark cave or a second, softer skin. It takes a moment to get used to this way of sleeping, especially if you are used to the open, airy feeling of a modern bed. But the herders have been sleeping this way for thousands of years. They know that the body loses most of its heat through the head and the extremities, and they know how to trap that heat, how to recycle it, how to make the most of every single degree of warmth. They are, in a sense, thermal engineers, with thousands of years of trial and error baked into their blankets and their habits. And they are not alone in their warm cocoons. The animals are doing the same. The llamas and alpacas have their own version of this warmth. They are, of course, naturally insulated, their woolly coats thick and dense, but they also know how to gather together, how to press their bodies close to one another, how to share the warmth of the herd. A single llama can survive a cold night, but a group of llamas can survive a much colder one. There is safety in numbers, and there is also warmth. When they lie down together, they form a dense, woolly mass, a single, slow-breathing organism, each animal contributing its small amount of heat to the common pool. Inside the stone house, the animal room is not separate from the sleeping room in the way we might imagine. It is often just a corner of the same room, or a small, partitioned area divided by a low wall or a curtain of reeds. The animals are not pets. They are not sentimental companions. They are first and foremost resources, sources of wool and meat and milk. But they are also, in their own way, members of the household. They are given names. They are blessed and celebrated. And on the coldest nights, they are brought inside, into the warmth of the human home, where their body heat helps to keep everyone alive. This is one of the great insights of Andean life, that nothing is wasted and that everything is connected. The animals keep the people warm, and the people keep the animals safe. The animals eat the grass, and the grass grows from the soil, and the soil is fertilized by the animals' droppings. The people weave the wool, and the wool keeps the people warm. And when the wool is old and worn out, it is stuffed into the walls, or used as a rag, or fed to the plants as compost. There is no waste. There is no separation. There is only a great, continuous cycle of giving and receiving, of warmth and nourishment, that binds people, animals, plants, and earth into a single living whole. We might feel a pang of envy, lying in our modern beds, thinking about this. Not envy of the cold or the hardship, but envy of the connection. The herders know every animal in their herd by name. They know the texture of each animal's wool, the temperament, the history. They have watched each animal grow from a wobbly-legged baby to a strong, steady adult, and they will be present at the animal's death, and they will use every part of it, and they will honor it in their prayers and their ceremonies. This is not a sentimental relationship. It is a deep, practical, spiritual relationship, a bond that may be closer to the truth of human-animal connection than anything we know in our sanitized, modern world. The night continues to deepen. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The wind blows its long, low, wordless song. And in the stone house, the sleeping family breathes in unison with its animals, a warm, steady rhythm that has been repeating itself on this high, cold plain for thousands of years. Let us imagine we are there, not as observers, but as participants. Let us imagine we have been invited to stay in the herder's home, to share their fire and their blankets and their warmth. We would be given a place on the floor, near the family, near the fire, near the animals. We would be wrapped in a heavy woolen blanket, woven by the grandmother, perhaps, dyed with natural colors, bright red and deep blue and earthy brown. We would feel the rough texture of the wool, the slight tickle of the fibers against our skin. We would feel the warmth of the family, their bodies close on either side, their slow, even breathing, their small movements as they turned in their sleep. We would hear the sounds of the animals, the occasional soft clink of a bell, the shuffling of hooves on packed earth, the long, contented sigh of a llama settling down for the night. We would smell the smoke of the fire, the wool, the straw, the faint, salty smell of human bodies sleeping together in a small, enclosed space. And we would feel, perhaps for the first time in our lives, a sense of radical safety. Not the safety of locks and alarms and insurance policies, but a deeper, simpler safety, the safety of being held by the earth, by the night, by the presence of other living things. This is, to me, one of the most beautiful aspects of Andean life. The physical cold is real, and it is harsh, but the human warmth is real too, and it is strong. The herders have learned to create warmth in the midst of cold, to create light in the midst of darkness, to create community in the midst of vast, lonely spaces. And this is not just a physical achievement, It is a spiritual one, a moral one, a testament to the power of human beings to adapt and endure and thrive. When we think about the herders, we might be tempted to pity them, to see them as poor, backward, suffering. But this would be a mistake, and the herders themselves, I think, would find it puzzling. They are not suffering. They are living. They are living a life that is full and rich, a life that is connected to the land and the animals and the sky in ways that we, in our modern world, have lost or forgotten. They are not wishing they were us. They are not dreaming of our cars and our computers and our centrally heated homes. They are dreaming of their llamas and their potato fields and their warm woolen blankets. As the night moves toward its most extreme hour, we might begin to feel the cold more keenly, even under our blankets. This is the time when the temperature drops to its absolute minimum, the time when the ice crystals form on the surface of the still water, the time when the frost creeps over the windows of the stone house, tracing delicate, lacy patterns that will melt with the morning sun. This is the time when the herders' bodies are at their lowest ebb, their metabolic fires burning low, their breath slowing, their dreams fading into a gray, half-conscious haze. And yet, even now, they are not in danger. The cold is strong, but it is not stronger than the cumulative effect of all their preparations. The house holds, the blankets hold, the bodies hold. The little pool of warmth that surrounds them, generated by the fire and the animals and their own living metabolism, is sufficient. It is meager, perhaps, by our standards, but it is enough. It is just enough, and that is all that is needed. This is a lesson that we might carry with us into our own nights, our own winters, our own struggles. You do not need to be completely warm. You only need to be warm enough. You do not need to be completely safe. You only need to be safe enough. You do not need to conquer the cold. You only need to coexist with it, to find a small, stubborn patch of warmth and hold on to it, and let the cold be, and let yourself be, and make it through the night. There is a strange and beautiful poetry in this. The cold is vast. The night is enormous. The darkness stretches out in all directions, seemingly infinite. And yet, in the midst of all that immensity, there is this small, warm, breathing pocket of life. A family, a fire, a herd of animals, a few blankets woven by loving hands. It is a tiny island of warmth in a sea of cold, a small, bright ember against the great dark, and it has endured against all odds for thousands of years. We might think of the other sleepers across the Altiplano, scattered over the high plain, each in their own stone house. There's a herder on this hillside, a family at the edge of that lake, a lone shepherd in a high valley. Each one is wrapped in their own cocoon of blankets, surrounded by their animals, guarded by their fire. And taken together, they are like a scattered flock of stars, a constellation of human warmth spread across the cold, dark face of the earth. Each one is small, fragile, vulnerable, but together they form a pattern, a network, a web of life that the cold cannot extinguish. And we are part of that web too, in our own way, in our own beds, in our own homes. When we pull the covers up, when we curl around a loved one, When we light a fire and sit beside it, we are participating in the same ancient act, the same fundamental gesture of survival and care. We are making warmth in the face of the cold. We are making light in the face of the dark. We are making life in the face of the void. And in that, we are brothers and sisters to the herders of the Altiplano. The hour before dawn is the loneliest hour. It is the hour when the night seems to have been going on forever, when the sun feels like a distant memory, a rumor, a promise that may never be kept. It is the hour when, if we are awake, we might lie still in our beds, listening to the silence, and feel the small, insistent presence of our own doubts and fears. It is the hour when we might wonder if we are going to make it through this long, dark night, through the winter of our lives, through whatever it is that we are facing. But the herders know that this hour always passes. It has passed every night for thousands of nights, since the first human beings made their home on this high, cold plain. The sun always returns. The cold always draws back, reluctantly, resentfully, but it always draws back. The dawn always comes gray and pale and tentative at first, then brighter, warmer, more confident, until the whole landscape is transformed. In the darkest hour, the herders do not panic. They do not despair. They simply wait. They have learned the rhythm of the night, the same way they have learned the rhythm of the seasons, the rhythm of their own breath, the rhythm of the animals breathing around them. They know that the cold is at its worst just before the sun appears. And they know that the sun will appear because it has always appeared, because the earth is faithful, because the sky is reliable, because the world is made in such a way that the night always ends. And so they lie there, patient as the stones, trusting as the animals, waiting for the light. And then the first faint gray begins to seep through the cracks in the walls. It is not much. It is barely perceptible, a slight change in the quality of the darkness, a faint silvering of the edges of things. But it is the beginning. And as the gray grows, the herders stir. They wake one by one with small, sleepy sounds, with stretches and yawns. The fire is rekindled. The flame is coaxed from the embers, fed with dry straw and twigs, coaxed and encouraged until it catches, and the warm yellow light fills the room, and the smell of smoke rises, and the kettle is put on, and the day has begun. The animals wake too. The llamas rise one by one, shaking themselves, their bells clinking softly. The sheep press toward the doorway, eager to get out, to move, to graze. The whole house comes alive, a slow, warm, rumbling kind of aliveness, a symphony of small noises and movements that speaks of the return of consciousness, the return of activity, the return of the bright, cold world outside. And when the herders step out of their stone houses into the first pale light of dawn, they see the world transformed. The frost has painted everything white. The ground crunches under their feet. Their breath streams in long, visible plumes. The sun is rising over the mountains, casting long shadows across the plain. And the world is beautiful, achingly beautiful, in its cold, clear, crystalline perfection. There is a ritual that some herders perform at dawn as the sun crests the horizon. They stand facing the east with their arms outstretched, and they welcome the sun back after its long journey through the darkness. They greet it by name, the way you would greet an old friend who has returned from a long journey. They offer it coca leaves, perhaps, or a small libation of chicha, the fermented corn beer. They give thanks for the warmth, for the light, for the promise of another day. And then they go back into their houses to drink their mate, to eat their breakfast, to begin their labors. This is the rhythm. This is the cycle. Night and day, cold and warmth, darkness and light. The herders of the Altiplano have lived inside this cycle for thousands of years, and they have not just survived it. They have flourished within it. They have built a civilization, a culture, a way of being in the world that is rich and deep and full of meaning. We might think, as we lie in our own beds, that this is very far from us. The Altiplano is thousands of miles away, at a vast altitude, in a climate that would challenge us. And yet, the herder's story is also our story. They are us, stripped of the comforts of our modern world. They are us, facing the fundamental questions of survival with nothing but their own courage and intelligence and community. They are us in the oldest, deepest, truest sense of the word. The night passes, the dawn comes, and the herders of the Altiplano rise to meet the day, as they have always done, as they will always do, as they continue to do even now, in our own time, in a world that has changed beyond their imagining. And as we too begin to drift toward the end of our own night, toward our own dawn, we might feel a deep, quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the warmth of our own beds. Gratitude for the story of these extraordinary people, their resilience and their wisdom. Gratitude for the simple, ordinary, miraculous fact that we are alive, that we are warm, that we are here in this moment together. The wind is still blowing across the high, cold plains of the Altiplano. The stars are still turning in their slow, silent dance, and the herders are still sleeping or waking or rising to greet the dawn. And we are here with them in a way. We are connected to them by the long, unbroken thread of human experience, by the universal struggle against the cold and the dark, by the universal capacity for warmth and hope. Let us hold onto that connection as we drift toward sleep ourselves. Let us feel the weight of our blankets, the softness of our pillows, the warmth of our own bodies. Let us think of the herders, their animals, their fire, their woven wool, their patient, unyielding endurance. And let us sleep gently, peacefully, safely, in the knowledge that we are sharing in the great, eternal human story, the story of making a place for ourselves in a cold and magnificent world. The sun has risen over the Altiplano. The light pours over the mountains and the plains, over the stone houses and the grazing flocks, over the sleeping herders and the waking ones. And the cold, which seemed so vast and invincible in the night, has retreated, has drawn back, has become something smaller, more manageable, more bearable. It is still there, and it will return tonight and every night. But for now, the day is warm, the world is bright, and life goes on. Life goes on. And perhaps the most remarkable thing about life on the Altiplano is how quietly it goes on, how unhurried, how ordinary it all seems once the sun has climbed into the pale blue sky. The frost melts from the stones. The air, which had seemed so sharp and so thin, begins to soften just slightly. The herders move about their chores with the same deliberate pace they kept the night before, the same slow economy of motion, the same calm. There is no rush on the Altiplano. The land is too large, the sky too wide, and the days too short for rushing. Everything is done in its own time, at its own pace, with a patience that we, in our hurried modern lives, might find difficult to understand. And yet, underneath this calm, there is a deep and constant purpose. Every act of the day is, in its own way, an act of preparation for the night. The water that is gathered in the morning will be used to cook the evening meal, to warm the hands, to fill the clay pots that will be placed near the fire. The straw that is collected in the afternoon will become bedding for the animals, or fuel for the hearth. The dung that is gathered from the fields, dried and stored in little piles, will burn through the long dark hours, feeding the small flame that is the household's heart. The herders do not think of this as preparation for survival. They simply think of it as life. They have always done it this way. Their parents did it this way. Their grandparents, their great-grandparents, back through countless generations, did it this way. The rhythm of the day is the rhythm of the night, turned inside out, and neither one can exist without the other. Consider the shepherd who rises in the morning and leads his flock out to the grazing lands. He walks slowly, his staff in his hand, his feet in their sandals of old tires or woven wool, following the animals as they spread out across the grasses. The puna grass is stiff and frost-touched, and it crunches underfoot. The llamas move with their long, elegant necks, cropping the grass with their strange, soft, mobile lips. The sheep follow, more scattered, more easily startled, their bells tinkling with every step. And the shepherd walks among them, not driving them, just walking, a slow, patient presence, a figure of calm. He is watching, of course. He is always watching, for the fox that might come sniffing at the edges of the flock, for the bird of prey circling high above, for the signs of illness or distress in the animals that are his wealth, his family, his responsibility. But he does not watch with urgency. He watches with a kind of steady, quiet attention, the way you might watch a kettle on the stove, or the way you might watch a loved one sleeping. He is present. That is all. And as he walks, he chews coca leaves. This is a small, unremarked part of his day. He takes a few leaves from the little pouch at his belt, places them in his mouth, and chews slowly, methodically, the way people chew gum, but with more ceremony, more meaning. The coca leaves are a companion. They soothe the stomach, which is often queasy at this altitude. They ease the fatigue of walking up and down the steep slopes. They quiet the mind, allowing it to drift into that calm, meditative state that makes the long hours of herding tolerable. And they are, most importantly, a gift from the earth, a small green offering of the earth's generosity. And to chew them is to enter into a kind of conversation with the land, a wordless, steady conversation that has been going on for centuries. Sometimes, if you are lucky, you might see a herder in the distance, coming down from the high pastures, his animals flowing around him like a slow, woolly river. He might be wearing a poncho of deep red or earthy brown, woven by his wife or his daughters, and his hat might be a simple knit cap or a wide-brimmed felt hat pulled down against the wind. He might have an alpaca at his side, a favorite, one that follows him like a dog, or he might carry a small lamb across his shoulders because the lamb was too weak to keep up with the flock. He is not a dramatic figure. There is nothing heroic about him, not in the way we usually understand heroism. He is just a man, doing what his ancestors have done for centuries, moving through the landscape with a kind of natural grace, a quiet belonging. And the landscape receives him. It does not oppose him. It is not an enemy. It is a home, the only home he has ever known, and he wears it the way he wears his poncho, and it wears him the way the stones are worn by the wind. Meanwhile, back at the house, the herder's wife is doing her own work. There is water to fetch from the spring, a walk of perhaps 20 minutes, down the path, past the stone walls, past the fields of potatoes, to the place where the spring emerges from the ground, cold and clear and pure. She carries a large plastic jug or a clay pot balanced on her back with a cloth strap across her forehead. She walks slowly with that same unhurried grace, and she sets the jug down, and she waits for the water to fill, and she watches the light play on the surface of the spring, and she may speak a few quiet words to the little shrine that is built beside the spring, or she may not. There is no need for words. The spring has been there for as long as anyone can remember. It has never failed, not even in the driest years. It is a small, faithful miracle, and she acknowledges it by her presence, by her patience, by the simple, ordinary act of waiting for the water. When she returns with the water, there is the cooking to do. The fire is lit in the small stone hearth that sits in the middle of the room. The smoke rises, but there is no chimney, so it gathers in the dark rafters and hangs there and slowly filters out through the cracks in the roof. This is the traditional way. The smoke is a problem for the eyes and the lungs, and yet it is also a kind of gift. It cures the thatch, preserving it, keeping the insects at bay. It coats the walls with a dark, shiny patina, the color of ancient leather. It scents everything, the clothes, the blankets, the very flesh of the people, with the faint, sharp smell of wood smoke and dried dung. When you live in such a house, you smell like the smoke, and the smoke becomes part of you, and you become part of the house, a single living being, breathing together, sleeping together, waking together in the cold, dark hours before dawn. The staple food is the potato. Of course it is. The potato was born on these high plains, and it has been the companion of the Andean peoples for over 7,000 years. There are thousands of varieties, each adapted to a particular altitude, a particular soil, a particular microclimate. Some are small and round, the size of a marble. Some are long and purple, like swollen fingers. Some are yellow, some white, some nearly black, They are all, in their own way, beautiful, and the herders know them all by name. They know which potatoes are best for boiling, which for roasting, which will keep through the winter, which will turn to mush if cooked too long. They know the taste of each one, and they know the stories of each one, where it came from, who first grew it, what its name means. And potatoes, more than anything else, are what makes survival possible on the Altiplano. Because the nights are so cold, a potato cannot simply be left in the ground all winter. It would freeze and rot and be lost. So the herders harvest them, and they do something extraordinary with them. They let them freeze, on purpose, deliberately. They take the potatoes that are too small, too misshapen, too cold damaged to be eaten fresh, and they spread them on the ground, on the bare earth, on the frost-hardened grass, and they leave them there, through the freezing nights and the bright, cold days, and they let the frost work its slow, transforming magic. Chuño. That is the name of the result. A freeze-dried potato, in effect, though it predates the modern invention of freeze-drying by centuries. The method is simple, and yet it is a profound piece of knowledge, a deep understanding of how to work with the cold rather than against it. Here is how it is done, at least the traditional way. The potatoes are laid out on the ground, on a clean, flat surface, and they are left there overnight when the temperature drops far below freezing. The frost seeps into the potatoes, and the water inside them turns to ice crystals, and the cells of the potato are broken gently, thoroughly, by the action of the cold. In the morning, when the sun rises, the potatoes are soft and thick and waterlogged, and the herders take off their sandals, and they step onto the potatoes with their bare feet. This sounds strange, perhaps even a little unpleasant, but it is an ancient and proven technique. You stand on the pile of soft, frost-broken potatoes, and you press, gently but firmly, and the water comes out, cold and cloudy, and the potato flattens, the flesh compacting under the pressure of your heel. The little ones are the easiest. They are the ones that are too small to bother with peeling, and so they are trampled whole. The larger ones are squeezed by hand or wrapped in cloth and squeezed the way. It is hard work, and it is cold work. Your feet are freezing. Your hands are numb. The water is frigid, but you keep going because you know that this is how you will eat in the winter. This is how you will feed your family through the months when the ground is too hard to dig and there's no fresh food to be had. And then, after the trampling and the squeezing, the potatoes are left out in the sun to dry. They are spread on the ground, on mats of straw, on the flat rooftops, and they lie there white in the sun, turning slowly over the course of several days into hard, shriveled, chalky little nuggets that look nothing like potatoes. They look more like stones or pieces of pumice or small, pale sea creatures washed up on the beach. They are almost completely desiccated. All the moisture has been driven off by freezing and by pressing and by the thin, intense sun. And in this state, they can be kept for years, years, a whole winter, a whole bad harvest, a whole drought, and there is food in the storehouse, hard and white and indestructible, waiting to be rehydrated. When you want to eat chuño, you put it in water and you soak it, and you soak it, and you soak it until it softens. Then you cook it, and it has a peculiar, pleasant, slightly sour taste, a taste of the cold itself, some say. It is not as good as a fresh potato, but it is food. And on the Altiplano, food is life. The herders do not waste the winter. They do not go hungry, because they have made a friend of the cold, and the cold has given them a way to store their harvest, a way to keep their food from rotting, a way to make the bounty of the autumn last through the long, dark months. The Spanish chroniclers, when they first encountered Chuño, were baffled by it. They watched the Andean people laying out their potatoes in the frost and trampling them with their feet, and they thought it was madness. They thought the potatoes were ruined, spoiled, thrown away. Why would anyone take perfectly good food and leave it out in the cold, only to stomp on it with their dirty feet? It seemed absurd, disgusting, a sign of the primitive, benighted nature of these strange people of the high mountains. The chroniclers wrote long, disapproving accounts of this practice, clucking their quills and shaking their heads. And yet, year after year, the Andean people survived and flourished and kept their families fed, while the Spanish, for all their civilization and all their technology, often went hungry. You could say that the cold and the potato, working together, protected the people of the Altiplano in a way that no army could. They had learned, over thousands of years, to listen to the land, to understand what the land was telling them, to work with the rhythms of frost and sun and rain. And the land had rewarded them with a nearly infinite patience and abundance. There is a secret to all this, a physiological secret, and it lives in the bodies of the herders. The human body, when it is born at high altitude, adapts in remarkable ways. The heart grows a little larger, a little more efficient. The lungs expand, and their capacity increases. The blood becomes richer, thicker, carrying more red blood cells, more oxygen, more life. A herder who has lived all his life on the Altiplano can walk and work and breathe at an altitude that would leave a lowlander gasping and dizzy within minutes. The herder's body has, in a very real sense, become a high-altitude instrument, tuned over generations to the thin, cold air. And there is a deep, quiet wisdom in this bodily adaptation. The herder does not think about his lungs or his heart. He simply breathes, slowly, deeply, steadily, and his body does the rest. And if we, in our own warm beds, take a slow, deep breath now, we might begin to understand, just a little, what it means to breathe on the Altiplano. The air is cold, and it enters the body like a kind of blessing, sharp and clear, and full of the smell of frost and dry grass. It fills the lungs slowly, and the lungs accept it greedily, gratefully. And then the breath is released, warm and moist, a small plume of visible vapor. In and out, slowly, deeply. The breath of the herder at rest, waiting for the dawn. This wisdom of the body extends to the way the herders sleep. They do not sleep on high, soft mattresses, as we might. They sleep on platforms of packed earth or stone, raised just slightly above the floor, cushioned by layers of woven blankets and sheepskins. The sleeping platform is narrow, just wide enough for one person, and it is positioned close to the fire so that the warmth of the hearth reaches the sleeper through the night. And the sleeper is wrapped in a kind of cocoon, a swaddling of wool, with a thick blanket beneath and another on top, and perhaps a heavy poncho over that, so that only the nose and the eyes are visible. The body heat is trapped inside this cocoon, and it builds, and it holds, and it protects. It is an intimate, almost nest-like way of sleeping, and it is perfectly suited to the cold. And here, at this moment, we see the animals again. Because the herder's sleeping platform is often shared, not with other human beings, but with the animals they are protecting. We might imagine that the llamas and sheep, with their thick wool, are perfectly content in the freezing night, that they are somehow immune to the cold. But this is not the case. The cold gets to them too. The newborn lambs, born in the late spring and early summer, are especially vulnerable. Their fleece is thin, their bodies are small, and the night temperatures can kill them with shocking speed. And so, the herders do something that must have been discovered in the deep ancestral past. They bring the vulnerable animals inside. They bring the newborn lambs and crias, and the weak and the sick, and the mothers who are having difficulty, and they bring them into the house, into the warmth of the human dwelling, and they let them share the fire. If you could look inside a herder's hut on a cold, clear night in the high Andes, you would see a scene that would surprise you with its crowded intimacy. The fire burns low in the center of the room. The family is gathered around it, wrapped in their blankets, sitting or lying on the packed earth floor. And near them, bundled up against the chill, are the animals. A small llama, still awkward on its long legs, its head resting on the leg of a sleeping child. A lamb curled in a tight, woolly ball, its nose tucked under its tail. A dog, half wolf, half something else, its eyes gleaming in the firelight. The air is warm and moist, and full of the smell of humans and animals and smoke. And there is a music to it, a soft, slow music of breathing, with many different rhythms, all rising and falling together like voices in a choir. This is not sentimental. It is practical, deeply practical. The animals are wealth. They are food and clothing and transportation and company. A dead lamb is a loss that cannot easily be replaced. So the herders keep the animals alive by sharing their own warmth, and the animals, in return, share their warmth back. A llama generates a surprising amount of heat, and a group of animals packed together can warm a room. There are nights when the only reason anyone in the house is warm is because there are a dozen llamas breathing their slow, deep breath into the small space. And there is a tenderness to this, a tenderness that we, as modern listeners, might find deeply moving. The herders know their animals as individuals. They have names for them. They know their personalities, their quirks, their habits. They know which llama is stubborn, which sheep is nervous, which one is always getting into trouble. The animals are not just livestock. They are, in a very real sense, members of the household. They are children, siblings, old friends. When a lamb is born, it is brought into the house, and it is given a name, and it is fed and cared for as if it were a baby. And in a way, it is a baby. It is the future, the continuation of the flock, the continuation of the family's wealth and security. There is a festival in some parts of the Altiplano that celebrates this bond between herders and animals. It is tied to the feast of Santiago, the patron saint of herders, but it has roots that go far deeper than any Christian tradition. On this day, the llamas and alpacas are decorated with tassels of brightly colored wool, and their ears are pierced with colored ribbons, and small bells are hung from their necks. The herders dance with their animals, and the animals seem, in their own strange way, to enjoy it, to participate. They are marked, blessed, celebrated. The herders drink chicha, the fermented corn beer, and they offer the first drops to the earth. And they sing the old songs, songs that were old when the Inca were young. And they are, in these moments, not just surviving, but thriving, making a world of beauty and meaning out of the cold, hard conditions of their lives. As the night deepens, the herders and the animals settle into a single, warm, breathing mass. It is hard, impossible really, to say where one body ends and another begins. They are all sharing the same warmth, the same air, the same darkness, the same slow rhythm of sleep. The cold is outside, pressing against the stone walls, seeping through the cracks, but it cannot get in. It cannot penetrate the barrier of living, breathing bodies. This is the great secret of survival on the Altiplano. It is not technology. It is not strength. It is not individual overcoming of the odds. It is togetherness. It is the decision to huddle, to share, to press your warmth into the body of another living creature, and to accept the warmth they give you in return. The herders do not survive alone. They survive together with their families, with their animals, with their neighbors, with their community. And community is not a vague abstraction on the Altiplano. It is a web of concrete obligations and mutual support. If one family's harvest is poor, another family shares theirs. If one herder's flock suffers a run of bad luck, the other herders help to rebuild it. This is not charity. It is reciprocity, Aini, the ancient Andean principle of mutual exchange. You help me today, and I help you tomorrow. The gift moves through the community like a pulse, like a warm current, and everyone is bound together in the knowledge that each person is the keeper of the other, and that survival is a collective project, not an individual one. No one is forgotten. No one is left to face the cold alone. You can see this principle enacted in the small rituals that punctuate the herder's day and the herder's year. The offerings to the earth, to Pachamama. In the morning, before any work is done, a person might pour a small amount of chicha onto the ground, a libation for the Earth Mother, who feeds them, who holds them, who provides the water and the grass and the animals. And there is no feeling of sacrifice in this act, no sense of giving something up. It is more like greeting an old friend. It is an acknowledgement, a way of saying, I know you are here, and I am here, and we are in this together. A coca leaf placed under a stone, a pinch of something, a breath of incense. These are small gestures, easily overlooked, but they are the threads that hold the world together. They are the wires, the cables, the connective tissue of the cosmos. The herders know, as we have forgotten, that the world is alive, that the mountains are beings immense and ancient, that watch over the valleys and the flocks with a patience that is almost impossible for us to grasp. The herders do not simply see a hill or a peak. They see a presence, a personality, a guardian. Each mountain has a name, a story, a mood. Some mountains are generous, giving rain and shelter. Others are demanding, jealous, capricious. The herders speak to them softly, as you would speak to an elderly relative. They ask permission. They offer thanks. And on certain nights, when the sky is clear and the frost has made the ground hard as stone, they might light a small fire at the base of the mountain, not to warm themselves, but to keep the mountain company. There is a word, Apu, that the Andean peoples use for these sacred mountains. The Apis are the spirits of the high peaks, the ancestors who never died, who stayed behind, turned to stone and snow to keep watch over their descendants. And in the deep of the night, when the wind moves across the slopes, the herders can hear them whispering. It is not a sound that carries words, not exactly. It is more like a feeling, a pressure in the chest, a sense that you are never truly alone. Even when you are far from the hut, even when you are out on the puna with only the animals for company, the Apis are there. They are the walls of the world. They hold the sky in place. And so the herder's relationship with the landscape is not one of mastery or fear. It is one of kinship. The earth is Pachamama, the mother, and the mountains are her sons and daughters. To walk across the Altiplano is to walk across a living body, and every step must be taken with awareness. You do not kick a stone carelessly. You do not pull a tuft of grass without asking. There is a courtesy to everything, a mindfulness that has been cultivated over thousands of years. It is late now. The fire has burned down to a bed of coals, glowing orange and red, pulsing like a slow heart. The herder's hut is dark, but the darkness is not absolute. There is the red glow of the coals, the silver of the moon through the cracks, the golden flicker of a star through a gap in the roof. The bodies of the animals are dark shapes, rising and falling with their breath. A child stirs, mumbles something in a dream, and then settles back into the warmth. The llama next to the child does not move. It is asleep, or it is pretending to be asleep. It is hard to tell with llamas. They have a way of being both present and distant, like old philosophers who have seen everything and are no longer surprised by anything. And it is here, in this darkness, in this warmth, in this quiet, that the true magic of the Altiplano reveals itself. It is not the magic of transformation or spectacle. It is the magic of simply being, of enduring, of staying alive through the long, cold hours and waking to see the sun rise over the frozen grass. The herders have no word for this magic, or rather, they have many words for it, but none of them translate easily into our language. It is the quality of being grounded, of being rooted, of being at home in a place that would kill you if you did not respect it. There is a story, one of many, that is told around the fire on the longest nights of the year. It is the story of the first herder, the one who learned to make fire and to weave wool and to speak the language of the animals. In some versions, he is a man. In others, she is a woman. In the oldest versions, it is a child, small and seemingly helpless, who is left alone on the mountain and must learn to survive. And in the story, the child does not survive by strength or cleverness. The child survives by listening. The child listens to the wind, and the wind tells the child where to find shelter. The child listens to the earth, and the earth tells the child where to find water. The child listens to the animals, and the animals tell the child how to stay warm. And because the child listens, the child is given a gift, the gift of the animal's friendship, and the gift of the mountain's protection, and the gift of the fire, which is not a thing to be taken, but a thing to be received, a guest that stays as long as you treat it well. This story is not a fairy tale. It is a teaching, a map, a set of instructions. It is the wisdom of the Altiplano, passed down from generation to generation, not in books, but in breath, in the rhythm of the telling, in the shape of the words as they leave the storyteller's mouth and hang in the smoky air. And when the child in the story finally grows old and becomes a mountain herself, the herders do not mourn. They say that she has gone home. They say that she is still there, watching over them, her snow-covered peak shining in the morning light, her glaciers melting into the streams that water the grass, that feeds the animals, that warm the people. This is the deep time of the Andes. It is a time scale that is hard for us to hold in our minds. We think in terms of years, perhaps decades, if we are ambitious. The herders think in terms of generations, in terms of centuries, in terms of the slow movement of glaciers and the gradual shifting of the stars. A plot of land is not owned. It is borrowed from one's grandchildren. A flock of llamas is not a possession. It is a trust, a living inheritance that must be passed on, healthy and strong, to the ones who come after. And so, the herder's life is pervaded by a sense of obligation, but it is not a heavy or burdensome obligation. It is more like a dance, a rhythm that you learn and that eventually learns you. You wake with the sun and you greet the day. You check the animals, feeling their flanks for warmth, looking into their eyes for signs of sickness. You take the animals out to graze, walking slowly, letting them set the pace, because there is no rush. There is nowhere to go that is more important than where you are. You mend a fence, you shear a sheep, you collect the dung of the animals for fuel, because the high, dry air of the Altiplano is too barren for trees, and the fire must be fed with the dry, fibrous droppings of the very creatures you care for. There is a beautiful circularity to this, a closed loop of giving and receiving. The animals eat the grass. The grass grows from the earth. The earth receives the animals' dung, and the dung becomes the fire that warms the herders, and the herders, in turn, protect the animals from the cold. Nothing is wasted. Everything is used. Everything is honored. There is a particular smell to a herder's hut in the winter. It is not a smell that we would find pleasant, exactly, but it is not unpleasant either. It is a smell of smoke, and wool, and earth, and animal, of dried meat and old sweat, of the sweet resin of the quinoa tree, when it can be found, and the sharp, mineral tang of the wind outside. It is the smell of a place that is alive, that is inhabited, that has absorbed the lives of countless people and animals over countless nights. It is a smell that, if you were to smell it, you would never forget. And in its own way, it is a smell of comfort, of safety, of home. The herder's clothing is a second skin, a moving shelter. We have already spoken of the poncho, that simple rectangle of woven wool with a slit in the middle for the head. But the poncho is not the only garment in the herder's wardrobe. There is the chalo, the close-fitting cap with ear flaps, knitted from bright, geometric patterns that are not just decorative, but deeply meaningful, each motif representing a place, a family, a hope. There is the polera, the full skirt that the women wear over multiple layers, each layer adding warmth and color. There are the sandals, made from old car tires, tough and durable, with woolen socks beneath. And there is the aweo, the carrying cloth, a large square of woven fabric that is worn on the back, used to carry everything from babies to potatoes to a newborn lamb. The aweo is like a portable home, a womb of cloth, and when a mother wraps her child in it, she is, in a way, recreating the warmth of the hearth, carrying it with her wherever she goes. The weaving of these garments is an art that takes years to learn. The wool must be spun by hand, using a drop spindle that whirs like a sleeping cat's purr. The yarn must be dyed, using plants and minerals gathered from the hillsides, colors that come from the yellow of the iku grass, the red of the cochineal, the deep blue of certain clays. And then the threads must be woven on a backstrap loom, the warp stretched taut between a post and the weaver's own body. It is a slow, meditative process, demanding patience and attention. The weaver sits, and the shuttle flies, and the cloth grows inch by inch, day by day. And when the garment is finished, it is not just a piece of clothing. It is a prayer, a record, a piece of the weaver's own life, woven into the fabric. When a herder puts on a new poncho, it is like putting on a gift, not just from the weaver, but from the world itself. And the world in the Andes is not stingy with its gifts, even if it is harsh. There is the gift of the potato, which was domesticated here in the highlands thousands of years ago, and which comes in hundreds of varieties, each with its own color, shape, and flavor. There is the gift of the quinoa, the ancient grain that nourishes the body, and that the Incas called the mother grain. There is the gift of the freeze-dried potato, the chuño, which is made by leaving potatoes out overnight to freeze, then trampling them to squeeze out the water, then letting them dry in the sun. This is a technology that seems absurdly simple, and yet it allows the herders to store food for years, to survive the long winters when nothing grows. And there is the gift of the coca leaf, not the coca that we know from modern history, but the leaf of the Andes, which is chewed or brewed into a tea, which dulls the edge of hunger and cold, which steadies the breath in the thin, high air, which opens the heart to the presence of the sacred. It is a gift of the mountains, and it is treated with reverence. When the herders gather in the evening, after the work is done, they sit together in the warm dark and share the stories, the songs, the silences. They speak in their own language, Quechua or Aymara, tongues that have been spoken on these slopes for millennia, before the Inca, before the Spanish, before any of the empires that have risen and fallen in the shadow of the mountains. The words are soft, musical, full of vowels and gentle consonants. They do not seem to have the hard edges of our modern languages. They flow like water over stones, and they carry the same patient force. There is a song that the herders sing to the animals, a melody that is almost a lullaby. It has no words, or it has words that are so old that no one remembers their meaning. It is a series of syllables, of hums, of whistles, of calls, passed from the lips of the herder to the ears of the llama. And the llama, in turn, responds with a low, humming sound, like a cello played far away. And in this exchange, there is a communication that is deeper than language, a shared understanding that the night is long and cold, but that together we will make it through. The stars above the Altiplano are like no other stars. They are so bright, so close, that you feel you could reach up and touch them. The Milky Way is a river of light, so clear that it casts a shadow on the ground. The constellations are not the ones we know. There are different animals, different heroes, different stories written in the sky. The dark spaces between the stars are also constellations, the dark cloud shapes in the Milky Way that the herders see as a llama, a fox, a serpent, a partridge. These are not random patterns. They are guides, calendars, markers of the seasons. The herders know that when a certain star rises over the shoulder of a certain mountain, it is time to plant. When another disappears behind the moon, it is time to harvest. The sky is not an abstraction. It is a clock, a map, a storybook, a companion. And under this sky, inside this warmth, wrapped in this darkness, the herders sleep. They sleep deeply, more deeply than we can imagine. Not because they are not worried, not because they have no concerns. They sleep because they have done everything they can. They have fed the fire. They have cared for the animals. They have offered the libations. They have spoken to the mountains. They have done their part. And now it is time to rest, to let go, to trust that the world will hold them, even as it holds the mountains and the stars and the cold. This is the gift of the Altiplano, the gift that the herders have received and passed on, generation after generation. It is the gift of trust, the trust that the sun will rise, that the grass will grow, that the animals will give their wool and their milk and their companionship, that the family will be there in the morning, and that the cold, though it is real, though it is dangerous, is not the final word. The final word is warmth. The final word is breath. The final word is the slow, steady, living pulse of the people and the animals and the mountains, all breathing together, all surviving, all thriving in the frozen night. And so, as we come to the end of our story, we might imagine our own beds, our own rooms, our own walls that keep out the wind. And we might imagine the herders, far away, lying down among their animals, pulling the wool over their heads and closing their eyes. And we might, for a moment, feel that we are there with them, wrapped in the same warmth, held by the same hands, sleeping the same deep, ancient sleep. The fire glows, the wind whispers, the stars turn slowly overhead, and the night, like the morning, is a gift. It is all a gift. Sleep well.